And welcome back to Hollywood Smoke for another installment of the 10 Count on UCN Live. I'm Steve Kim, joined by the editor of Ring Magazine, Doug Fischer, and Mike Baca. Guys, we have an issue in boxing. It is great that ESPN, HBO, and Showtime are all investing into boxing. We have a problem. HBO, Showtime, and ESPN are investing into boxing, and it split up the boxing talent, and we've got a situation which May 12th, we thought we were getting Lomachenko-Linares, except Golden Boy does not, in essence, want to counter-program themselves on ESPN while they have a live fight with Saddam Ali and the replay of Canelo-Golovkin. I don't even know what to say at this point, except that is boxing in 2018.
You've made this point for years now. It's not just recent. When boxing fans and members of the media complain about the sanctioning organizations.
Holding up fights.
They say, oh yeah, they say they're terrible for boxing. They help fracture the sport. You've always pointed out that the networks prevent more significant fights than the belts. And oftentimes the belts with their mandatories actually force significant fights. The networks, listen, we need it. You know, you can't have a sport without them. They put the product out there for people, so they help build stars.
They pay well.
And they pay the licensing fee, which helps the promoters put on these shows and develop this talent that hopefully one day become world champions, stars, and maybe even pay-per-view superstars. So they're going to want to protect their interests. And it's natural for them to form alliances. And we've seen it work in the past. With certain networks, when HBO had close to $100 million bucks a year budget, they were able to do business with everybody because everybody wanted to do business with HBO, and that included some huge, powerful promoters like Bob Arum's Top Rank and Don King. Now it's more fractured. It's weird. It's a little bit more of an even playing field. You know, you have Showtime that has maybe the most talent with the Al Heyman stable. So they have a lot of American talent, but the drawback is oftentimes that talent doesn't want to fight each other, and they fight once a year, maybe twice a year. You have HBO, which has been in the business of boxing for a long time, and they've got it down to a science with the way they produce their shows and everything. But right now they just have Golden Boy, and to a lesser extent, Tom Loeffler and Kathy Duva, basically. And then you have ESPN. They've got Top Rank, but all they have is Top Rank in terms of the elite class, the world-class talent, and that includes Vasyl Lomachenko and Terrence Crawford. Maybe that still includes a big name like Pacquiao, and then a bunch of guys who could develop into something like Oscar Valdez and Jose Ramirez and some of the other up-and-comers on the Top-ranked stable. And the problem with that is Bob doesn't play well with others. So where do you go from there when Top-ranked their top fighters fight each other, or you have a situation like with Lomachenko where he needs a significant dance partner in order to advance his career. Then what happens?
Mike, if you're HBO, though, and I've made this point, I don't want to be overly critical because I think Peter Nelson really inherited a bad situation with the PBC and some toxic assets. But if you're HBO, and am I wrong in your opinion that when I say HBO, that 80% of their boxing program nowadays seems to be focusing on Canelo pay-per-view dates, and then by a byproduct of that, Canelo pay-per-view replays. There's something wrong with that, is there not?
Certainly. I'm for sure HBO subscribers are not happy at the moment. They haven't been happy for a year. Maybe there's a little bit of strategy on HBO in regards to that. I personally think, and I'm not clued into the negotiations of it, but I think HBO and Peter Nelson are going to be going after Anthony Joshua.
That much is clear.
And, the landscape will change if that signing happens.
Yeah, right now it's Canelo and Golovkin are the business, the big business for the network. They make money from that. And I'm sure they long for the days when Golovkin could fight 3 or 4 times, you know. And once upon a time, Mike, you know, 20 years ago, the biggest stars, somebody like a Canelo or a Golovkin, they would still be pay-per-view stars, but they would still have HBO fights.
Yes.
They would have 2 or 3 HBO fights and 1 big pay-per-view fight, or 2 big pay-per-view fights, and that's just not the case
Yeah,
anymore.
De La Hoya was that guy.
He was that guy, absolutely, and that doesn't happen anymore. When you reach that pay-per-view plateau, that level, now you become a twice-a-year fighter. So then the challenge for HBO is what kind of programming are we going to put on in between these 2 huge pay-per-views and those replays? And so far, the only competitive stuff they've been getting is from Tom Loeffler with the Superfly series.
Yeah, Superfly has become their Transformers franchise. Just keep pumping them out, and people are going to enjoy it.
Well, they better. Right. I hope they do.
Well, they made an investment into light heavyweights.
Right.
But the problem is, so have the other networks. Okay, so HBO at one time used to be the 800-pound gorilla. Now I think we have 3 600-pound gorillas. So now it's like a war in the jungle. Like, who's going to control stuff? And Lomachenko Garcia is just the latest example of how conflicted things can be with controlling interest, because Top Rank's made it clear, and I've talked to Bob about this, the 2 pillars of ESPN's boxing program are Lomachenko and Crawford. So under no circumstances, no matter who they fight, will they ever leave ESPN, in my view.
Now, let me ask you this. If a fight can be made between one of their 2 pillars, Crawford or Lomachenko, with a fighter from another network.
Let's say Spence.
Let's say Spence. If ESPN goes to pay-per-view, do you think it can be made?
That's the interesting part. Mario Lopez and I had Todd DeBuff, the president of Top Rank, who really was the architect of this deal.
Right.
We asked him about that scenario. If you look in the past, when people have reached across the aisle, Lewis Tyson, Lewis Holyfield,
De La Hoya, Trinidad.
right, Whitaker, Chavez.
Right.
When the fights are
Right.
big
You're talking
enough,
about across the network
right.
divide. Yeah,
right.
actually, I think De La Hoya and Trinidad were both HBO fighters at that point.
Right, and Trinidad had gone to HBO
Right,
at that.
right.
But once a fight gets to the pay-per-view plateau of at least being able to do, let's say, 1 million pay-per-view buys, then everyone finds religion, like, oh, yes, as Rodney King said,
Let's do it for the sport. Yeah.
we can get along.
Right.
But in terms of just...
That's going to take some
So
time.
when Bob Arum was saying, no, we're going to trade fighters, this ain't baseball cards. Okay, you're not trading a Cal Ripken rookie for a Tony Gwynn rookie and then some, they're in a Barry Bonds. It doesn't it's like these networks, and I wrote this long ago, that the networks in terms of their boxing highlights, their biggest stars, HBO looks like their biggest stars, which used to be Oscar, Floyd, like The Sopranos. It's their franchise.
Right.
They don't want The Sopranos going on Netflix or Cinemax or Showtime. So that's where it's almost like every promoter that gets into business with a network, they're almost becoming co-promoters. Because look at the marketing material. And I asked Kathy Duva this on March 3rd. I said, is this sport more divided than ever? Because there used to be a time, in the good old days, people don't focus. CBS, when they were doing boxing, I think they were in a deal with Bob Arum. NBC was in an alliance with Main Event, and then ABC was controlled by Don King. So I asked, well, Kathy, so what's the difference? He said, easy. The media now is willing to talk about it. So really, this is nothing new.
Yeah. And another thing that we had 20 and 30 years ago is when you'd have a fight on one of the subscription networks, Showtime or HBO, or a pay-per-view event, a week or 2 later, it would be on a network. It would air on a different network.
Why'd that change?
I don't know.
I mean,
that's a good question.
I'll be honest.
Well, you know what? I think the subscription networks began to get greedy.
Absolutely.
And they wanted to retain those rights, and own the foreign rights and all that kind of stuff.
I'll be honest. My parents were not taking me to a movie theater on a Tuesday night to watch Hearns Leonard, but I did watch it a month or 2 later on ABC.
Yeah.
And my point is, the game of boxing needs to do a better job of cultivating new and more fans. A replay is what it is. It still does solid ratings. But when you do a replay on HBO, you might get 1 million or 1.2 million to actually watch it. If you were to put Canelo Golovkin on ABC or ESPN a week later, now you're talking real numbers.
Yeah, that's true.
Look, this can easily be a boxing sucks segment.
You mean it hasn't been? I thought it was.
Yeah, but I'll look at the positives here. One positive I have is that I'm not sure the landscape will be like this 2 years from now. Why? Because 2 years from now, 2 years back from now, the landscape wasn't like this.
Yeah.
It's going to change.
It does. It's constantly evolving.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? Right now, we may complain because we're trying to look in the future and saying, well, the top fighters from ESPN, HBO, and Showtime may not fight each other because of their network contracts.
Mm-hmm.
But for the time being, we do have quality boxing on 3 major networks.
Absolutely. And my second principle here, competition, it's a basic rule in economics. Competition is good. We'll see what they do with it. Maybe it drives one out, and that'll be good.
So to close this out in the immortal words of Bob Arum, he told me last year, Steve, nothing ever changes, nothing ever stays the same. So with that, on behalf of Doug Fischer and Michael Baca, this is Steve Kim saying goodbye, everybody.